Okay, so now we're at 3.5 arrays. And we're going to show you the difference between arrays and array lists. So let's get into it. Okay, so now we're in 3.5 array. Let's go into the curriculum. As you see on my screen here, we're at 3.5 in the curriculum, and I actually have the array gradebook open file right here so we can compare the difference. So here we've learned about arrays in Java in previous lessons. So let's spend a moment comparing them to array lists. Array lists are generally easier to use than Java's array. Let's see why this is. Notice here, we're saying easier or generally easier. Why does Java have both arrays and array lists? The answer is historical, at least in part. Java is a C-style language, and arrays are the most basic data structures in C. Using an array over an array list might be preferred in some circumstances, primarily for performance reasons. Arrays operations are generally faster than array list operations. Well, let me stop right there and explain something to you. What we mean here is that arrays, we understand that they have a fixed size. You set in the beginning how many elements will be in that array. So because we have a fixed size, in memory, when it's stored in memory, it's already allocated that much space for it. So therefore, it's not taking up as much space in memory. Where with an array list, you don't know how big it's going to be. So therefore, in memory, the compiler has to assign more space that you may or you may not use. Now that goes back to the big O notations for data structures, which we don't talk about here in this course, but I will kind of talk about it a little bit to kind of help you understand it. And it's called time and space complexity. And that's when we're talking about the N of O, O of N to the second power, all of that stuff. I'll go over it a little bit later on. That's a little bit more deeper than what you are going to learn now in Java. But personally, I think I will talk about it because I want to help you kind of better understand data structures and how they work. So let's get back into the curriculum. Also note that arrays are a fixed size. You cannot expand or contract an array after it is created. So you must know exactly how many elements it would need to hold when you create it. This fact is reason enough to use array list in most scenarios. To illustrate array usage, here is a version of the gradebook program using arrays instead of array list. So if we look at here, we look at the syntax. I'm over here in IntelliJ right now. And as you can see, we have the class array gradebook, and we're breaking it down to you with here, the variables. It says allow at most 30 students. So that's a max number, which is a int. And here's all of the data that's inside this particular file. So note that we have to decide upfront how large our arrays, student, and grades are going to be. Here, we have set it for 30. It can't be no more than 30. But what if I need more than 30? What if I got 100? Well, I won't be able to add them here. I will have to write a different program to handle that because arrays are limited. And it says, thus, this program sets arbitrary maximum amounts of students, likely larger than any user will enter. It may seem obvious then that arrays has no equivalent add method. The only way to access and alter an element in an array is with bracket notation. Using an explicit index, for example, Gradebook defines a counter variable num student. So there it is right here on line 16. We have num student. When the first student is entered by the user, the value is stored in new student. If the value is not the empty string, then the item in students at position 0, the initial value of num students is assigned to the new student value. The next time the do while loop executes, the value of students at position 1 will be assigned, and so on. Because we must always access and assign array elements using an explicit index, our code can seem littered with array counter variables like our friends I and J. And if you're coming from JavaScript, you're familiar with nested loops, for loops, or where we have I and then J when we're creating those nested for loops. And it's more difficult to read, not to mention more error prone. Like array list, however, we can loop through any array using a for each loop as long as we don't need to use the index of the current item. If we only wanted to print each student's name and not their grade at the end of our program, we could do the following. Here's the example right here at the end of the program. We'll use arrays in Java from time to time, but for the most part, you should rely on array lists to store collections of values or ordered data. Ordered data. That's something you want to keep a pin right there. We're going to discuss that later. So here's some references. Check your understanding. And remember, the more you practice, the more you improve. All right. See you in the next video.